The other day, a page one report in the Australian newspaper featured an Australian lady who was providing support to ex-Saudi woman Rahaf Mohammed al-Qanun, who fled Saudi Arabia fearing for her safety after renouncing Islam. The report by Caroline Overington began with these words about the Australian lady that is assisting. Quote, ex-Muslim Zara K was just 8 years old when she put on the hijab and 18 when she moved to Australia and eagerly took it off. But it was the following sentence which really outraged me, although I suppose I should not have been all that surprised. It quoted Zara K, who then said, "People asked me, have you been paid by the Jews?" regarding her decision to renounce Islam. Let's just go over that again. This now 26-year-old woman moved to Australia from Tanzania and left Islam, and people asked her if she had been paid by the Jews to do this. What grotesquely anti-Semitic conduct. Despite all their protestations to the contrary, it is clear to just about everyone that anti-Semitism is ingrained in Islam. It is clear to just about everyone, except our Jewish communal leaders, who insist that their interfaith activities within the Muslim community is producing dividends. Really? If that is the case, then I would ask them to produce any evidence that all the reaching out to Islamic leadership has made one scintilla of difference. All we can see is that we do all the reaching out and they maintain their hard line on Jews and on Israel. It was only last year that the Vice President of the Islamic Council of Victoria stood up at a public rally and said that the creation of Israel was a mistake that needed to be corrected. Historically, Jews understand the background for religious anti-Semitism. At the times of their formation, both Christianity and Islam took offence when the Jewish people of the day refused to acknowledge their respective prophets who claimed to have had an encounter with God. I'm not saying that they didn't. That is up to the Christians and the Muslims to believe what they want. But what we do know is that both of these religions became violent when Jews refused to discard the Torah as a basis for practicing religion. Only it was worse with Islam, because while Christianity recognises Judaism as the precursor to the revelation of Jesus as the messenger of God, Islam is a supersessionist religion, which believes that it replaces the two religions that came before it. To get a clue what could likely happen here, the evidence for Islamic anti-Semitism in Europe is chilling. Whilst there are indeed neo-Nazi groups who have been there for decades, their views have been largely restricted to a few nutters. The real worry over there is that as Islamic immigration has risen, so has violent anti-Semitism. And just to make the point on this, here is a little illustration. I live in the Caulfield area, for which non-Melburnians is known as the Bagel Belt of Melbourne. It houses a high density of Jewish people, along with synagogues, kosher bakeries, grocery outlets, booklets and gift stores. This suburb has a highly visible Jewish presence. Yet there is also a Muslim population in this broader locality, and they live here very happily. In fact, some years ago they even applied to use a council building in the middle of Caulfield as a prayer house on Fridays. And as far as I know, this went ahead. We don't bother them and they don't bother us. But just imagine if a few Jewish families tried to move into Lakemba in New South Wales or Preston in Victoria. I shudder to think what the reaction of the local Muslim population would be like. If we need high fences and armed guards to protect our institutions in the Jewish area, what protection might be required for Jews living in a Muslim neighbourhood? Anti-Semitism in Islam is entrenched, yet many of our communal leaders prefer to chase neo-Nazi wannabes rather than deal with the clear and present danger of ingrained anti-Semitism within the Muslim community. It is reasonable to ask, why is this? Well, my opinion is that it is a lot safer and a lot less risky for them. Everybody agrees that neo-Nazi anti-Semitism is bad, and our communal leaders know that they won't get into any hot water pursuing the neo-Nazis. But raise the spectre of Islamic anti-Semitism and you open yourself up to accusations of racism and Islamophobia from both the Islamic community and the left. Never mind the facts, just daring to speak about which should not be spoken is fraught with danger. So they don't. I've said it before, but in no way do I want to minimise the problem of far-right neo-Nazi anti-Semitism. Blair Cottrell, Neil Erickson, and whoever else they manage to drag along with them are despicable people whose views and activities should be roundly criticised by all Australians. But the fact remains that their brand of neo-Nazi acolytes are a small group that do not represent any real threat to the Jewish community. Certainly they are very active making social media videos, printing leaflets, painting on swastikas on fences occasionally, and yelling out to the Jews as they drive by. But generally, there has been very little violence in this country from these people. The threat is there, of course, but as everybody knows, this is not why we have high fences and armed guards at our Jewish institutions. I want to conclude by pointing out one thing. The Australian Jewish Association is the one and only Jewish communal organisation that will speak out on this issue. Every other body is too politically correct and too afraid to say what needs to be publicly said. The AJA doesn't purport to speak for anybody other than those people who share our views. But there are individuals in Jewish leadership who hate the idea of a more conservative view within the Australian Jewish world and will try to censor us wherever they can. This big tent of theirs is large enough to include every Jewish left-wing organisation which considers interfaith activity and the two-state solution as their holy grails. But if you want to have a discussion on the relative success or failure of these concepts, then watch out. They are coming after you. Somehow the tent seems to shrink very quickly because they just can't find the space to include views that diverge from their well-worn mantras that are being challenged in other parts of the world. I'm sure that Zara Kay knows full well about the anti-Semitism inherent in the Muslim community. It is a pity that some of our Jewish organisations are too willfully blind to see this also. This is Alan Freedman from the Australian Jewish Association. If what we say aligns with your personal views, please share this video far and wide, and also consider subscribing to the AJA by visiting the website. It's jewishassociation.com.